Welcome back to Money Majlis. Today, we will discuss a hugely important topic that we have not covered in Money Majlis episodes before. The topic of development banking. And to discuss this with me is a dear ex-colleague and one of the brightest UAE national leaders that I know in the UAE banking industry. But before I introduce my guest, here is a commercial break to acknowledge the four sponsors of this show.
This podcast is proudly brought to you by MasterCard.
Money Majlis is sponsored by Weo Bank. Fuel your ambitions with banking designed to power your success. Discover more at weo.io.
Money Majlis is brought to you by Network International, the leading digital payments technology company in the Middle East and Africa.
Money Majlis is proudly supported by Aqua Now, the premier crypto-as-a-service provider, now building in partnership with the top financial institutions in the Middle East. Discover more at aquanow.com.
In Money Majlis today, we will talk about development banking. Development banks are those that are focused on providing loans for or investing in the equity of industrial and infrastructure projects. They also provide guarantees so that such projects as well as MSMEs get private funding. We know of global development banks like the World Bank, Asian Development Bank or ADB, and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development or EBRD. In the UAE, the only development bank is called the Emirates Development Bank or EDB. EDB is a key enabler of UAE's economic transformation, providing support to five strategic sectors. Five strategic sectors are healthcare, advanced technology, manufacturing, renewables, and food security. To talk about development banking in the UAE in general, and EDB in particular, joining me at Money Majlis today is none other than His Excellency Ahmed Al Naqbi, who is the CEO of EDB. Ahmed and I were colleagues about 12 years back at the National Bank of Abu Dhabi, and I'm so pleased to have him in the studio today. Ahmed Al Naqbi leads the UAE's only development bank, the EDB, which was created to enable large, medium, and small businesses to drive economic impact in, as I said, five national priority sectors. The broad influence of Ahmed as a CEO is a product of the unique nature of EDB's mandate itself, as well as its significant financing scope and capacity to impact the UAE community at economic, social, and environmental levels. Under his leadership since 2021, that's 3 years plus, the bank has been offering a patient debt approach with flexible pricing and tailored financing solutions to close lending gaps and maximize access to capital, especially for the SME sector. In addition to leading EDB, Ahmed is a member of UAE's Industry Development Council and serves on the CEO Advisory Committee for the UAE Banks Federation or UBF. He is also on the Board Advisory Committee for the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Center or SHERA. Prior to joining EDB, Ahmed served as Managing Director across retail, corporate and investment banking at the National Bank of Abu Dhabi and the First Abu Dhabi Bank. Ahmed is an alumnus of the Harvard Business School and Virginia Tech School of Architecture and Urban Studies, USA. Ahmed, welcome to Money Majlis. How are you?
Thank you, Suvo. I'm fantastic. Pleasure to be here today.
Absolutely, and we are meeting formally after 12 years since we were together at the National Bank of Abu Dhabi, where you headed digital banking for NBAD.
Absolutely. So earlier on in the career, one of the things that we built out very early days, even pre-iPhone, was different electronic banking services in the National Bank of Abu Dhabi. It's really where I got my start, and very much was able to build different solutions and different businesses that later became the first innovation lab in a bank. It was the new banking services that were being built out. We had launched the first mobile banking in the country. We had launched the first wage protection, Ratibi,
yeah.
payroll systems in the country. We had launched our e-dirham services for the federal government at the time as well, the second generation. And so it was a fantastic opportunity at that time to really bring together my background as well as my passions and what I like to do, which is to find gaps, challenges, and then build products or build solutions.
Excellent.
It's great, yeah.
You know, I spent a brief 2 years at NBAD,
Yep.
National Bank of Abu Dhabi, but those were very exciting years. We worked together on so many different things, and I'm so proud of the legacy that we left behind at NBAD.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was a great time. You recall we were building also the new banking services, the NBD Direct, the transformation of
Correct,
that,
correct.
digital bank. Those were like the precursors to the digital banks today, right? They were incubated and built within the commercial banks, the existing commercial banks. It was very exciting at the time. Yeah, absolutely. It was a great environment to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, shifting gear to your current role, Ahmed, I want to start with the big picture. As the UAE's first and only development bank, the Emirates Development Bank, or EDB, has an ambitious mandate, I believe, to provide 30 billion dirhams of financing to 13,500 small, medium, and large businesses in the UAE. How are you progressing on this roadmap? Could you share some details of some of the important projects, the significant ones that have been supported by EDB, and which have been able to make strong social impact? And what are some of the innovations that you're proud about?
Sure, of course, be happy to. Let me go back a little bit just into the history of the bank, just to set up exactly where we are today. So the history of the bank is that this bank has existed for many, many years, but it was a real estate bank, there was an industrial bank, and there was an agricultural bank that was owned by the government. These banks were merged in 2014. The merge actually started in 2009, was completed in 2014. When the merge was completed, the focus remained on the real estate bank, and the industrial bank, which existed, went dormant, essentially. It was just a legacy book that was being run down at the time. So for about the next 7 years, it was just a real estate bank. And they focused on Sheikh Zayed housing program, mortgages for UAE nationals, first home buyers, first home builders. So when I came into the organization in 2021, there was no corporate commercial bank, there was no SME bank, and as you said, it was quite a hefty mandate. Now, why that mandate came about, it came about because of COVID, essentially, right? So leadership and their wisdom during COVID always finds a silver lining that, okay, one of the things that we can keep an eye out on, other than the fact that we want the resilience and sustainability for the UAE in those 5 key sectors that you mentioned, we also wanted to take advantage of the fact that the world was changing very clearly. And what was clear was that you had to move to a decentralized model of manufacturing. You couldn't just rely on one primary country to manufacture everything and then have it, imported into the country. And for the sustainability and longevity of the country, of course. So that's why manufacturing came about. We saw the silver lining, leadership saw that silver lining, that the manufacturing hub of the MENA region should be the UAE. We have the best infrastructure. We have the best quality of life.
Yep.
We have, fantastic talent. And already, all these businesses were heading over here. And then that goes in conjunction with the CEPA agreements that are being signed, with the free trade agreements that are being signed with multiple countries.
Yeah.
So the wisdom, these aren't things that happen by fly overnight. This is stuff that started the work in 2021, but we're starting to see the fruits of that today in 2024 going into 2025. And so food security, obviously, another very clear sector that we're focused on because of COVID. We should be able to manufacture all the staple foods here in the UAE. Why not? The advanced technology exists out there in the sense of the agri-tech platforms that exist today that you can grow just about anything, even in a desert environment. Healthcare, again, very clearly with COVID.
Yep.
Pharmaceuticals, the machinery, we want all of that to be built here in the country. Advanced technology was a component of manufacturing. So advanced technology, we wanted to ensure, was a component of manufacturing to ensure that manufacturing was not just today, but it was sustainable for the future. And in true UAE style, to leapfrog the competition, so to speak, so that the UAE is top when it comes to manufacturing in the region. And then lastly, renewables. And renewables, very clearly for us, the UAE, we don't view ourselves as a oil and gas producer. We are an energy producer and an energy leader. And this has been in the works and being planned since the mid-2000s with the creation of Masdar. And the UAE has really taken a leading role in major renewables projects across the world. I would have to say that the UAE is probably the leader when it comes to that. And the culmination of that was COP28. Some people think COP28 was the start. No, the culmination was COP28 of really putting the seal on the fact that the UAE is the renewables leader in the world when it comes to supporting these kinds of initiatives. So in 2021, when I came in, the bank was a mortgage lender. You being a banker, and I'm sure many of the listeners who are bankers will understand that being a mortgage lender is very different to being an SME corporate banker.
Absolutely.
Right? Whether it's the talent, whether it's the systems, whether it's the policies, the processes, your delegations of authority. So we needed to do a complete transformation on the organization. And in the end of the day, banking really is dependent on people, individuals. And so we had to attract the best talent. And I was able to, alhamdulillah, get some of the best talent in the market from commercial banks by selling them the story of EDB, which for me was very, very simple. One, we're going to create the best possible environment here. This is going to be a place where people love coming into work every day. Two, us as bankers, after a while it gets a bit old. Okay, what do I mean by that? When all you're doing is chasing profits, and year on year it's just, okay, you did X last year, now do X plus 1. You did X plus 1, now do X plus 2. After a while, you start to question your purpose. You start to ask yourself, okay, well, I'm here just to maximize profits. And if you do that enough over a certain period of time, you start to ask yourself, well, what other value am I bringing to the table? What other benefit am I bringing to the table? So with a development bank, I felt that it was fantastic that I could wake up every day knowing that I could put my skill set to the development of the economy of the country, which helps future generations, creates jobs. So it was a noble purpose that I felt my skill set would be good for. And that was actually how I convinced a lot of the fantastic bankers that came and worked with us. We're a small boutique, right? So when you talk about some of these major banks around the country, it's very hard to compete with them if you're going to talk about just purely monetary compensation.
Correct.
You can be in the range, you can be somewhat on par, you know how they do it. They have different matrices and they say, you're in the third quartile, fourth quartile, second quartile. You can be in the third or second quartile. But it's very difficult if that's the only thing that you're trying to convince someone to come in with, right? But if you sell them on the purpose, and it's a real purpose, by the way, a lot of people actually came in with big smiles on their faces saying, yeah, okay, this is what I want. This is what I want to do.
So was it an easy sell, Ahmed, or is it an easy sell? Because bankers are reputed to be very money-minded, right, by the nature of their jobs. How easily do they take to social objectives?
I would tell you that that's a misconception about bankers.
Yeah.
They're human beings at the end of the day. Now, you'll have some people, obviously, it's a range, and you'll have some people that are on one end of the extreme who are only looking for the monetary gain. And I'm telling you that's a very short-term way of thinking of things, and they typically fizz out over time. And then you have people that are completely on the other end. We like the people that are somewhere in the middle, right? But a lot of bankers, I think, felt the same way I felt, which was, what is my purpose? Is my purpose just to make money and make more money and make more profits specifically for this organization? Because it rings quite hollow over time when all you're chasing is quarterly targets and yearly targets.
Correct.
There has to be a bigger objective and bigger purpose. And I think what commercial banks can do a lot better is communicate their purpose. I'm not saying commercial banks can't have a purpose outside of profitability, but I just don't think that that's very clearly communicated. I'm not even talking about to the market. I'm talking about to their own employees, to their own people in the organizations. If you ask anybody working in any of these banks, what is the purpose of your bank? I doubt they'll have anything bigger than to make as much as we can for the shareholders, right? Which is fair enough. That's what you're there for, right? You have the capital of the shareholders and you're trying to maximize your returns. Very, very simple. But there has to be something a bit bigger than that if you really want to retain talent and attract talent over the long term.
No, interesting point you make there, Ahmed, about the KPIs or key result areas at work. How do you measure performance of employees at EDB? Are there metrics that cover profits separate from the financial ones, separate from social impact? What takes higher priority?
So I'll give you our values, and then I'll go into the actual scorecards just to keep it as simple as possible. And we live these values. These values are real for us. They're not just on the wall. Because that's, again, another thing that I've seen a lot of organizations not do very well, is they'll have values that'll be on the wall that nobody actually cares or follows.
Correct.
They do one conference a year, one town hall, and that's it. We actually live them. Our first value, our top value, is economic impact over profit. That's literally our value.
Okay.
And we're not shy about it. We put it in front of our board. We talk with our employees and as we induct them, and it's how we make decisions. So in many ways, when we're sitting there and we're making decisions, when we debate to go left or to go right, these values come in. Economic impact over profit is always the top one. The second value that we have is live a culture of respect. So again,
Respect.
live a culture of respect. We're a small organization. We're about 350 people. You know just about everybody by name. No one wants to come to work every day and work for 8 to 10 hours a day with people they don't like and have, the kind of office politics and the kind of things that will ruin an organization, will be a cancer in an organization from the inside.
Yep.
So we fight that and we combat that. Our third value is excel through partnership. Again, being a small organization, inside we've broken all silos. Everybody works together and we have to all work together. Outside, we excel through partnerships across the industry, federal government, local government, private sector, chambers of commerce, departments of economic development, in order to get to our objectives.
Yep.
Fourth one is excel through innovative excellence. So the point that we were talking about earlier, innovation is very much a part of our DNA. And it's not about necessarily big, huge projects, although we have some of those. It's about every day I tell people, well, question everything you're doing. Look, we have an advantage in EDB. Our advantage is that over 80% of my employees are less than 2 years in the bank. They come with an energy. They come with a mindset. And they don't have to combat a legacy, an incumbency that's been there for decades. You know how it is in large organizations that have been around for decades.
So you can create something new.
You can create something new.
Yeah.
So I tell people, I'm like, you have an opportunity. Leave your thumbprint. Challenge everything, as small as a policy, a process, how you draft an email, how you put a PowerPoint together. Think about those small innovations that you can do, and it'll be welcomed, and it'll be supported, and it will hopefully be even standardized across the organization. Lastly, inspire through ambition. So we think about, us being a small organization, but you're asking about our objectives. We generate between 7 to 8 billion of new assets to the organization every year. That's incomparable to organizations that have 3,000-4,000 employees. Look at the efficiency ratio. Right? I mean, we're talking about 300 versus 3,000. 10 to 1. How are we able to do that? Well, one, we're very ambitious, but two, again, excelling through the partnerships, which is one of those values that we have. So our objective, going back to the question you asked me earlier, is to have lent out approved 30 billion in lending across all those segments and products by the end of 2026. We've done about 13 billion so far. So alhamdulillah, even while building the organization and transforming it, because we had to build it from scratch over the last 3 years. And it took us a good 2.5-3 years to get to the point of where we felt like, okay, now we have an organization that is somewhat complete. We were still executing, and we were still going out, and we were still lending, and we were still doing all that business. So we're at about 13 billion now. We should close the year between 7.5 to 8 billion in new assets, and we're going to maintain that trajectory for the next 2 years to get to that 30 billion. So we're on track for the 30 billion, alhamdulillah.
Excellent. Excellent. But Ahmed, given the social objectives, which probably provide a more fundamental meaning to one's work, do you believe employees at EDB are generally more satisfied than they are at other banks?
Absolutely. Without
Do you measure this?
So here's a couple of things that we measure. So going back to the KPIs, thank you for reminding me about that. We look at a scorecard the same way any organization would. They'll have multiple facets. So you'll have your financial objectives, your strategic objectives. We have economic objectives as well on there, economic KPIs. Our portfolio has a development score. People are measured against that. The development score is measured through a scorecard that every single transaction that goes through EDB is measured against. This is proprietary. We developed this and created it ourselves because we had to figure out a way to measure ourselves against our mandate. This includes things like in-country value, GDP impact, jobs created. Is there advanced technology components? Is there any kind of green components into this project that we're financing? there's about 30 fields, quantitative and qualitative fields, and every transaction is measured from 0 to 6. And against that transaction, that 0 to 6, you're then being, depending on how high it is, you can give flexibility in tenor, pricing, covenants, and it allows us then to really be very much focused on our mandate and to keep the focus of the individual that this is just as important. You want to forgo the profitability, you want to have a lower return on this transaction, demonstrate to us the impact that it has economically. So people think about that every day. Just yesterday, I was at my strategy offsite, and we were debating some things for 2025 without getting into too much details because it's confidential. But we had a very healthy debate on whether we felt that we were being a bit commercial in our thinking with some items around our financials, our budgets for 2025.
Yep.
And it was good. I loved hearing. And you know who was the person that was challenging the most? My chief business officer.
Really?
He was the one that was challenging, but that is commercial thinking. We need to think more development impact. And that's the person who you would think in the entire organization would be the most commercial minded, right? But you can really see that it's a part of the DNA, and it's very much something on an individual level that people strive for.
So, Ahmed, you talked about the scorecard, which is economic, social, environmental, etc. How easy is it as a banker to marry these assessments, which are non-financial, with the conventional financial underwriting results to arrive at the right decision? Let me expand the question.
Sure.
How do you then manage conflicting social objectives? I'm sure you have some of those. For example, a manufacturing setup that generates a lot of jobs, but can have adverse ecological impact. How do you marry these objectives?
Right. So it's a scale, right? And as I was just mentioning, every transaction is evaluated. We don't see them as being conflicted necessarily. On that scale, from that 0 to 6, 0 being completely commercial in nature, and 6 being the unicorn of transactions that is the perfect transaction when it comes to economic impact. It typically will lie somewhere in between there, right? So typically if they're over 3, those are the ones that are more economically impactful.
Yep.
In the scorecard itself, as I mentioned, in this economic impact scorecard, you will have things like the renewables, the green energy, all these kinds of items. We have to always keep in mind, and by the way, the UAE again is a leader when it comes to the manufacturing space, is a leader when it comes to embedding this renewable energy technology into the manufacturing process. I've met with several industry leaders of steel and aluminum. The UAE is a leader in green steel and green aluminum. They're incentivized actually to do so because they're able to open up so many markets around the world because we have this kind of advanced technology. So I don't see it as being conflicting. We have to understand that as a country, as we go through a cycle where we're building up an industry or sector, there will be potential adverse effects with some of these factories to the environment. But the overall should always be that it's a net positive and not a net negative. Otherwise, it is an unfair advantage to others who have built up their industries and economies 100 years ago, creating the environmental problems of today, and then coming to developing countries like the UAE and saying, oh, well, you bear the responsibility.
Correct.
No,
Correct.
sorry. We will build our country. We'll do it in the best way possible, and we will make sure to have the best technologies embedded into these industries. But that being said, let them fix their backyards before they come talk to us about what we're doing. Right? We're doing things very, very well in my opinion, at least from what I've seen with the hundreds of transactions that we've financed over the last 3 years.
Ahmed, are you pressured sometimes to do good, like you're saying, but without losing too much money? Does that result in your being excessively cautious on the kind of business you can support? What are your typical approval rates for projects that come to EDB?
So the projects that are financially viable and that meet certain criterias, we probably have over a 95% approval rate. It's quite high.
Wow. Okay.
It's quite high, yeah. When it comes to pressure on profitability, look, the bank has to be sustainable. So for us, sustainability is ensuring that we're protecting the bank. It's a trifecta, right? So there's deploying 30 billion by 2026, having the security and safety of the book for the bank,
Yep.
and having the economic impact. So you want all three to work together and not work against each other. And so what we find is that on the sustainability side and the protection of the bank, we need to ensure that we're meeting certain hurdle rates. But these hurdle rates are a fraction of what commercial banks would be looking at, because commercial banks, on their RAROCs, their returns on risk-adjusted capital would be between 15 to 25%. Ours are typically around the 5% mark. So we price a lot more conservative might not be the right word, a lot better than the commercial banks.
Yeah.
But that being said, that's not the only component that we look at. We look at the fact that we give long tenors, right? So your average tenor for a facility or a loan in a commercial bank will be between 3 to 5 years. If you have a long-standing relationship with that bank, maybe it'll go up to 7 years. Ours will average 7, will go up to 10 and 12 even,
Okay.
right? And it would be very much based on the transaction and the project itself, because what we care about is the success of the project. No one is asking us at the end of the year, how much money did you make for us this year? Is it more than you made last year, right? They're looking at how many projects have you financed? What is your economic impact? What are the economic KPIs? How much FDI was brought into the country?
Correct.
These are how many jobs were created. These are the kind of things that I'm asked by my board at the end of the year. So I wouldn't say, I think we've found the right balance, but it was a journey, by the way. So over the 3 years, between transforming the mindsets of the bankers and between aligning with the expectations of the board, granted that, again, this was a mortgage bank to start with.
Correct.
Right? Getting to the point of where we are today, which is, alhamdulillah, fantastic alignment from our chairman to the front receptionist. I can tell you everybody understands what we do and how we do it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Now let's move to the topic of SMEs, which
Sure.
is a very hot topic in the UAE and in the region, right? We know that there are 500,000 of micro and small enterprises in the country, in the UAE, and the UAE wants to make it 1 million by 2030. A persistent challenge that this sector faces, SMEs face, is that when scaling up and requiring access to credit, the commercial banks are looking at maximum, a minimum vintage, looking at scale of business, etc.,
Yeah.
and assessing startup risks probably a bit too intensely. How should the banking system in the country look to addressing this, in your view? And what is EDB doing in this area? Because a persistent complaint that we see all the time in the media is SMEs saying the banks are not sympathetic to their cause.
Right. Look, there's different ways that have been adopted in other markets and other countries. The central bank can play a role in the sense of putting certain ratios or percentages or requirements of lending to SMEs.
You mean minimums?
Minimums,
Yeah.
yeah. But that is a bit tricky because you do have a much higher default ratio,
Correct.
right? And I prefer the incentivization route as opposed to the requirement route. So what
The
we
carrot rather than the stick.
Yes, absolutely, because you do want them to be active participants and not just doing it. I'm talking about the commercial banks, not just doing it because they've been forced to do it. So, for example, what we do at Emirates Development Bank is we have our credit guarantee scheme program, where we work. We have now 13 banking partners, all the top banks in the UAE, where we guarantee for them the capital or the lending or financing that goes into the SME sector. Granted, it's within those 5 key sectors. We do up to 50% or 10 million dirhams as a cap for the facility or the loan. And we found that for them, it's a great piece of collateral, right? So they can all of a sudden de-risk, hopefully price it more favorably for the SME, and then lend out. And we've done so far, I think close to 1 billion dirhams, probably around 1 billion dirhams of guarantees with those 13 partner banks.
Okay.
And that's our portion. So you take their portion, it's anywhere from 1 to 2 times our portion, right? So they'll use that 10 million guarantee for a 30 million dirham loan.
Is this only for UAE national owned SMEs?
No,
or
it's
all?
for everybody. As long
Okay.
as they're within those 5 key sectors, we're more than happy to support them. So you could almost say that there's almost, at least I would say, 3.5 billion dirhams of commercial banking lending that has gone into those sectors because of this guarantee program that we have in place. The other thing that we found, for example, when I first started the job, I spent about 3 months just visiting partners, and this is why we came up with that value of excelling through partnerships.
Yep.
And when I would meet these partners, all of them have different issues and different concerns, but there was one common concern that they had that came across everyone: free zones, the DEDs, the chambers, the different vehicles or entities that are set up for economic development, all had one common problem: opening up bank accounts for SMEs. Big issue.
Yeah.
Now, can I blame commercial banks? I mean, I was in that world for a very long time, and as you said, we've worked together on the digital side of things,
Correct.
mobile and web. And
Yeah.
we know the KYC, the AML. I can't blame them. I understand. They have exposures around the world. They have to be super careful because they also don't want to fall into a trap or an issue where they end up with fines, or they're exposed to dollar and euro and other currencies, and they have branches that are they're not just regulated locally; they're regulated internationally, and so they have to go through quite an intensive KYC and money laundering process to onboard someone. And to be honest with you, for a lot of them, it's just not worth the headache. It's just not worth the headache. High risk, low returns. You offer them a solution, a mobile banking or online banking that requires continuous OPEX in order to keep it maintained and updated and so on.
And we have seen some of the larger international banks withdraw from the sector for that very reason, right?
Absolutely. And again, I can't blame them, because if I was in their shoes, to be fair, maybe I would take that decision as well if I'm looking at it purely from a commercial perspective, right?
Yeah.
But from a development banking perspective, like, no, this is important, because how can you come and start a business in the UAE and not have access to the banking system?
Yeah.
How are you supposed to do anything? How are you supposed to then, go buy your goods or materials, import things? How are you supposed to do that? You can't do it based on cash or based on a barter system.
Yep.
And you can argue that that's also quite dangerous if you're doing it just based on cash. So we also have this mantra that we don't believe in empire building in EDB, again, excelling through partnerships. So we said, look, let's work with the fintechs. We can work with the fintechs on us being the ledger, us being the core bank, essentially, and launching a solution to the market that would allow entrepreneurs and small business owners to open up bank accounts, and it has to be fast. So literally within a matter of a month and a half, we had launched the platform. And so very much from your years in banking, launching an online platform in a month and a half
It's very impressive, yeah, absolutely.
From conception to launch, it's quite impressive.
So you're saying the fintech helped you develop the front end while you did the back end?
Yes, so they linked to our systems, our core systems. We were the ledger, and they developed with us the front. They already had basically a ready-made solution. And we
multiple fintechs or just one?
So to start with one. So to start with one on the onboarding, on the KYC, on the transactional banking, basically. And we were able to do it so quickly. And by the way, we were able to onboard our clients under 48 hours.
Wow.
Full KYC.
Okay.
We're able to do it because we operate only in UAE dirham and only in transactions locally. So again, with the background of understanding why the problems or let's say the issues are there with the commercial banks, we were able to find creative ways to do it ourselves without having to go through that lengthy process. We then tagged on a microfinance lender, Beehive, who was also one of our partners.
Yep.
We then also tagged on invoice discounting. So for medical, we're working with Claim. For general, we're working with TCP. And then over time, we decided to in-house the platform in order to tag on as many fintechs as possible. So essentially, we've just launched the second version a few weeks back. It's still in the, you can say the early days of, we haven't really marketed it or anything because we're just ensuring that everything's set up properly. But this version, we're going to start tagging on debit cards. We're going to start tagging on VAT calculator. We're going to tag on WPS. This is not by any means to replicate what commercial banks have done. This is to be targeted specifically to entrepreneurs and small business owners. Basically, this is the app that they will download to give them a one-stop shop of all their needs as entrepreneurs. I come to the country, or I decide one day to set up a business. I can download the EDB Digital Business Banking application. We've called it EDB 360. And it's EDB 360 because 360 degrees of services for the entrepreneurs. And the purpose or point is that I don't need anything else. Now, in the long term, what we're hoping for, they'll use this application, build a financial track record, and graduate from us to the commercial banks.
Understood.
So hopefully
That's amazing.
that
Is EDB 360 live now?
It's live.
Okay, I can download the app and
You
open
should
an
be
account.
able to, yes.
Excellent. So this is obviously going to address a very long-standing issue that you rightly said has been a big bone of contention for SMEs, account opening at banks,
Yeah.
right? And I know for a fact, having been in commercial bank for so many years, that it can be a frustrating experience, yeah,
Absolutely.
at most banks.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about fintechs there, Ahmed. UAE is ranked as one of the premier fintech hubs in the region. 4,000 fintechs today, going up to 7,000 in the next few years, and expanding in very innovative areas like BNPL, payments, crypto, and others. Now, I'm talking about a different question here, apart from the collaboration with fintechs, is about financing fintechs. This requires understanding technology, understanding the markets. Are you financing fintechs?
No, we are not. So it's
Okay.
not part of our key sectors, but we are supporting fintechs. So the fintechs that we believe can sit on our platform and add value-added services
Yeah.
to the end users,
Yeah.
we can support them. And there's different ways that we support them. We shy away from balance sheet lending for them specifically,
Yeah.
but we do support them by potentially giving them a facility, potentially giving them client base, customer base, access to market. So we do support them in those ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood. My next question is about partnership, which you talked a lot about. Do you also partner, Ahmed, with other development banks in the region or with the international development banks? How does that work?
So it depends. It depends on, look, the mandate of EDB is focused on the UAE. So all of our development is here in the UAE. Now, we've met with KDB, the Korean Development Bank, with KfW, the German one, with SIDF out of Saudi Arabia. We've met with the ones that were produced through IRENA. We work with them more from a knowledge sharing perspective. So we try to understand their standards. Doesn't necessarily mean that everything they do is valid or relevant, because it's different markets, different focuses for those countries and
Yeah.
those regions.
Yeah.
But we try to understand their standards, how they measure their KPIs. We try to understand the best practices, best learnings. If they have programs in certain areas that are important to us, like agri-tech, for example, what have they done? We reach out to various countries and have conversations with them on that. The direct relationship that we have with ETAF, which is a part of IRENA, which is to finance renewables, I would say is the premier partnership that we have with a development organization external to the UAE. Of course, inside the UAE, every single development organization is our partner.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to think of, the incubators, the DEDs, the chambers, ADIOs of the world, the Dubai SMEs of the world, the Sharjah Invest of the world, all of them are partners of ours. Yeah.
Now, I will shift gear from EDB, Ahmed, to you yourself now. You've been a very, very talented banker, and when I last knew you, you were the head of. When we last worked together, you were head of digital banking for National Bank of Abu Dhabi and BAD. Since then, you worked in wholesale banking, you worked in investment banking, you worked in international banking, you worked in treasury and global markets, you worked in a variety of areas. As as a UAE national leader of a bank today, what would be your advice to my UAE national colleagues in the banking sector? Should they look at diversifying the experience as they move along, or should they look at specializing in an area that they like? How should one, play one's career if you want to get ahead?
Sure. So look, so it's not for everyone to start with, right? Everybody thinks that, they want to be the CEO, but in reality, it's a huge responsibility. I don't even want to say the word burden, but there's a lot of accountability and responsibility that goes alongside that role.
Absolutely.
Which people have to understand. This is not a vanity thing. If you take on that responsibility, you have to be accountable for what you do.
Yeah.
And I sometimes fear when people want that role, but they want it for the wrong purpose, which is just for the financial gain.
Or the prestige.
Or the prestige.
Yeah.
You forget, well, what is the purpose? Again, I go back to purpose. What are you doing? And those are the ones that are lackluster in their performance or in their what they do. They might do it for a couple of years, but they won't do anything wow or anything special. Again, my opinion. For those that understand the responsibility and accountability that comes with that role, I would tell them that you need to have a multifaceted background in banking. You could be a specialist, and a lot of CEOs are specialists, but it becomes, you might be able to manage and run an organization, let's put it that way. You wouldn't be able to build it, right? Because if you had to build all of those functions from scratch, how could you do that if you can't speak their language? Now, it's not to say that being multifaceted all of a sudden makes you an expert in any of those areas. You're not, I don't consider myself an expert in treasury or in global markets. I don't consider myself an expert in any of those fields that were mentioned that I've worked in for several years. In the sense that there's people that know much more than me in those areas, that have worked in those areas, but I can speak all of their language. I can understand everything they're doing, and I can tie it all together into one big picture. And that is something unique. And if you're going to build an organization, you have to have that kind of skill set. Otherwise, you're really, I don't know what to say, but maybe doing it just based on what you're being told by some consultancy, which is, I think, a route that a lot of people take, right? A measure for success for me, or something that matters a lot, is learning the skill set of resilience, having the ability to adapt and change.
Yeah.
And when I say this, I really mean it. I've seen people struggle when they go from one role to another. It's very difficult. I've struggled as well. But I mean, as in they check out, they completely fail, right? Learning that kind of adaptability and resilience is something that takes a long time. It's something that hopefully most people, if you're going to develop it, you develop it in your childhood. It's not something that you just wake up one day after a 20-year career and are able to just shift over to something else, right? It's not easy. And I think people underestimate the difficulty of that. The other thing is being able to identify gaps and build products and solutions. And I'll give you a story. So from the beginning of my career, actually how I ended up in the retail bank where we worked together.
Yeah.
When I joined National Bank of Abu Dhabi in 2005, I was in the HR department. They had done a rotation for me.
Yep.
So you'd spend a couple of weeks in various departments. I'd started mine in the recruitment department and HR department. And I remember sitting there and watching the recruitment officer that I was assigned to, to shadow, take CVs that were coming in. Okay, we got this CV today, we got this CV, we got this CV. There's a role, there isn't a role. The ones that there's no role for them to be interviewed for, they take that piece of paper, they put it in a cardboard box under the table, under the desk. At the time, being a young graduate and someone where passed out my CV probably to 20 different entities, I was like, this matters. Like I care about this document. Like it's something for me that was important. It's a representation of the person.
Correct.
And at the same time, I was like, that's such a waste. So I asked the person, I was like, what do you do with this box? He's like, at the end of the week or 2 weeks, it fills up. We send it out to Musafah. Musafah is the industrial area in Abu Dhabi. We have warehouses up there for storage.
Warehouse, yeah.
They keep it for 5 years, and then they destroy it. And so that stuck with me. So my next rotation was in IT. And then in IT, I had finished, a couple of, shadowing of this person, that person, and they were like, you're gonna be here for another 2 weeks. Typically, as an intern at that point, sitting there for another 2 weeks, me just sitting at the desk and staring at the wall for 2 weeks. And I'm the kind of person I need something to do, otherwise I get disengaged. I always need something to do. So like, you know what? With my web design and development background, I'm going to build for them an SQL database on Microsoft. I'm going to link it to a web page, and I'm going to prototype it and then show it to them. So I did this. I sat there for a couple of weeks and I built this. And then I went and I talked to the head of recruitment and the head of HR. I'm like, do you guys see a value to this? Would you want to use this? Like, yes. So they loved it. So then I went back to the head of IT, and the head of IT at the time, I spoke to him and I was like, look, I built XYZ. Can you give me a couple of developers to polish it and make it, a proper function that can link with our systems? I'm like, yeah, sure. If that's what the head of HR wants, we'll do it. Why not? So this was the first system. This became the recruitment system of the National Bank of Abu Dhabi in 2005. Now back then, websites were the thing, right?
Yeah.
The iPhone wasn't out yet or anything, this kind of thing. And it evolved over time. And of course, that SQL database was searchable by field. All the data of the forms of the CVs were entered, and then you could actually query it for certain
skill sets
exactly that people had, and then you can get all the CVs that are relevant to it. Now what's the point of this? The point of this is what I'm saying is that I looked at a cardboard box, and was able to see a gap that I was able then to create a solution for. And I think too many people walk around almost like zombies, like sleeping. They walk around their day and they know that this is not the way it's supposed to be done, or they know there's a gap here, or they know that there's a better way to do it, but they don't bother themselves. Why should I be the one to create a solution? Why should I be the one to fix it? That's someone else's job. And so if you ask me, for young bankers or people that are entering the industry, or people that work in the industry, If you want to stand out, there's a lot of opportunities and ways to stand out. And do it in a positive way. And a positive way to stand out is to create something, build something, find an opportunity. I was a young guy. I mean, I was 23 years old. Sometimes I think to myself, I'm like, how did I go talk to the head of IT? How did I go talk to the head of HR? Right? But I just had the initiative to do so. And so if you have the initiative and you have the eye to be able to find gaps and then build solutions, that will hopefully allow people to succeed and progress in their careers.
100%. I think initiative and passion are two things that take you very, very far in life.
Yep.
But Ahmed, tell me, as a CEO now of a very important institution for the country, what would you describe as your single biggest challenge? If you had to pick a challenge, there are many challenges of being on this hot seat. If you had to pick up one challenge as a CEO, what do you think is the biggest challenge of being a CEO?
People management, by far. You can, and this is what I mean by leadership and by it's not for everyone. People think that by being a CEO that you're going to be, the way to do it is to be dictatorial and to, enforce your will and your opinion. Sorry, you don't know everything. And if you're doing that, typically it's out of insecurity.
Yep.
But the difficulty there is the balance to ensure that you have your people deliver and execute and you get the most out of them and the best out of them.
Yeah.
If you've reached the point of a CEO, you most likely have some kind of knowledge and experience, right, in your field, in your industry. So it's not about the knowledge and the experience. And by the way, you will never have the knowledge and experience, as I mentioned before, on everything.
Yep.
So it's impossible. I pride myself in sitting in the room with my executive team, with people around the table who are smarter than me on every single topic. When it comes to finance, my CFO is smarter than me. When it comes to HR, my CHRO is smarter than me, right? When it comes to the chief of my business, he's smarter than me when it comes to the products and services of our business. I pride myself on that. And that's how it should be.
Yeah.
But where the CEO comes in is how do I get them all to work together? How do I get them all to, the sum of the many is more than the individual contribution of each person. And that is not easy. That is probably the biggest challenge, is leading people and getting them all to deliver results in harmony.
Yep.
Doesn't mean yes men. It means everybody can challenge, but we always have our North Star, our understanding of what our objective is,
Yep.
and everybody's actively working towards developing that objective from their perspective.
Excellent. Excellent. So my final question to you, Ahmed, today is about yourself as a person, not as a professional. How do you balance the demands of work with the demands of a young family that you have? What is your mechanism to cope with the pressure at work and at home?
Look, it's quite difficult, absolutely, because I give my all to my work and my profession, but I also prioritize my family, and family for me always comes as number one. So it's not easy, but I'm incredibly organized. I mean, I have to be by default. You can't survive in this kind of role if you're not organized. And then I make sure to allocate as much time as I possibly can to my kids. I have a daughter that was just born 2 months ago. I have 3 daughters, actually.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I have another daughter who's a year and a half and another daughter who's 6 years old. So I make sure to give as much time as possible as I can for them. So my Saturdays is for them. That's it, period. It's my entire Saturday is a family day. My Sundays, as much as possible, is for them as well. And then typically during the week, it'll be the evenings are for them. But you have to have a work-life balance. You cannot just, throw yourself into work and ignore the rest of your life. That's not healthy, whether it's on a personal or even on a professional level. I find people that have a work-life balance actually are much better at their jobs.
Correct.
People that are consistently just giving all their time to their work ends up being burnouts essentially over time, right? So it's not easy, but it's something that you learn over time, and organization is the most important part of it.
Wonderful. Ahmed Al Naqbi, thank you so much for your time today at Money Majlis. It was a wonderful conversation with lots of nuggets of wisdom, not just about development banking, but also developing people, developing yourself in your career. So thank you very much, and great to meet you again after a long time.
Thank you, Suvo. It's great seeing you as well. Thank you.
This podcast is proudly brought to you by MasterCard.
Money Majlis is sponsored by WEO Bank. Fuel your ambitions with banking designed to power your success. Discover more at weo.io.
Money Majlis is brought to you by Network International, the leading digital payments technology company in the Middle East and Africa.
Money Majlis is proudly supported by Aqua Now, the premier crypto-as-a-service provider, now building in partnership with the top financial institutions in the Middle East. Discover more at aquanow.com.
That's it for today's episode of Money Majlis. I hope you enjoyed today's show and will share it with your friends, family and colleagues. Till next time, goodbye and ma salama. Stay well and do good.